Give folks a few more seconds to get into the room, and then we'll get started right at the top of the hour. All right, it's right at 2 o'clock, and we have a jam-packed day today with 3 project demos and research on using xAPI. So really excited about it. Today is our 11th web session, so we are in the home stretch here. Next week we'll be wrapping up our web sessions. We still have our party in December, and I'll give a reminder about signing up to present there. Today we have Andrew Corbett from UC Davis Health that's going to present on learning analytics with virtual patient data and what students learned there. Then we'll hop into Team Makey Makey. Hi, Andrew. Team Makey Makey will present a demo on their infrastructure, and then Team Pebble is going to talk a little bit about their storyboard in the Pebble book. So it's going to be a great discussion today. We have 877 folks registered for cohort, and behind the mics today you have myself, Erin, and Jamie, and Jamie's birthday is today, so go ahead and wish her a happy birthday. Again, reminding you that we are in our project team demos, and next week we'll wrap up project team demos. With that, I'm going to pass it on over to Andrew, who's going to share his screen with us today. So,
hi, everyone. It's a really nice, unexpected surprise to be presenting this work to you today. This is something that I presented at the AACE's Innovate Learning Summit conference last Thursday. So I'm giving you the same presentation. And I'll tell you, there's a lot more people here than there were at that. So this is doubly nice. And I'm excited to be able to share the work because it's been a number of years in development. But I'll point out, this is not going to focus on the xAPI as much as the analysis of the data that we obtained through xAPI, but I'll be happy to answer any detailed technical questions about it later if those come up. So this is work using virtual patients, gathering xAPI data from students, interacting with those virtual patients, and using it to look at clinical reasoning in those students. My name is Andrew Corbett. I'm a senior instructional designer with UC Davis. I work for the Continuing and Professional Education Division. The work was done with the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing. Oops, hang on. So, let me define a virtual patient. Basically, you're creating a simulated patient encounter on the computer, where, to the extent possible, there's many different levels of fidelity that you could do with this, but to the extent possible, you're trying to present the student with the same problem they would have if a patient was in front of them, where they have basic information about why they're there, but then they have to go through a process of discovery. And in the simulated patients that we deployed at the School of Nursing, the students were able to look at the patient record, gather patient history data, conduct a review of systems, or do a physical exam. None of this was video game level, but the problem and the simulating the actual problem, I hope, was high fidelity. So then when they were in this simulation, they had dozens and dozens of questions they could ask, or bits of information they could gather. For each one, they had the option to flag it as significant or not. And we were tracking pretty much every action that the student did in these. And the key question we're exploring is, if we collect data on student choices within a simulated patient encounter, which we did here, is it possible to use data analytics to detect specific challenges or specific patterns in clinical reasoning in those students? And this is particularly important for clinical reasoning because it's obviously a high order cognitive skill, where you have a patient in front of you. It's in essence an unknown what's going on with them, and the job of the clinician is to sift through all the information they're asking the patient, that they're getting back from the patient, asking the right questions, doing tests, figuring out from all that information what is important, lining that up to come up with the right diagnosis and the right next step, the right treatment for that patient. This is not something that's easy to assess with traditional multiple choice tests. It is often assessed with in-person exams called OSCEs, clinical examinations. But that, of course, is time-consuming. But if we use virtual patients, then you're able to do more of them, and you're able to give students more formative experiences with those patients. So the data I'm going to be talking about is 4 of the virtual patients that were presented to first-year nurse practitioner and physician assistant students for 2 cohorts. So the first year in, I think it was 2016, and then the following year, 2017, where they all saw the same versions of these virtual patients across their first year. Different patients, well, except one was repeated, different conditions at different presentations in terms of what is their presenting complaint or problem is that they're coming to the doctor with. So, xAPI. You guys know about xAPI. I'm not going to go a lot into this, but what you will probably be interested in is we actually did a special, got somebody in the IT department to create a little routine for us so that from Lectura, we were able to call this routine, pull back a unique identifier for a student that was not tied to any identifying information. It was simply a random GUID, if you know what that is. And then we used Lectura's ability to talk to an LRS and send statements. We were using Yet Analytics LRS platform for this. Oops. Excuse me, I'm working on 2 different screens here. So we're going to zero in on the data that we actually worked with. Now, a couple of years ago, I presented this work at the xAPI party, and I had just done my preliminary naive, messy pass through the data, in which I found very little of interest. And then after that point, I did another pass through and got smarter, and have come up with this subset of the data and some very interesting insights that we gained from doing data analytics, once I actually learned how to do some true data analytics. So what we're looking at is the key pertinent findings for each of these patients. Each one of them has a set of findings that any competent clinician should recognize as being key to their deciding what's going on and figuring out what they should do next. So in the case of a person with pneumonia, there were 8 of them, and it's possible to generate a percentage success on these for a student. So if they got recognized 4 of these, but did not mark the others as significant, then they get 50%. If they get 6 of them, then they get a 75% score on this. And we can do the same for the 3 other virtual patients that the students saw, and calculate a percent success for those. And from that, we look at them in total, we're able to see that generally students did well recognizing pertinent findings for these patients. One of them, this this one is screening for high blood pressure. They did less well, but not, alarmingly so. This tells us some things, but what we really want to know a couple of different things to probe further into this. We want to know, are there sets of students who did consistently less well on all or some of them than others? And if we are able to find that, we'd like to know why. Is it possible to look into specific decisions or specific kinds of pertinent findings that would tell us more about what kinds of mistakes they're making? So the first step in that is to do cluster analysis, which is basically a mathematical algorithm. It's not a statistical technique, but this is not my data. This is not the data from this study. It's just a schematic, and it is showing that if you look at these two variables, there's no correlation. But if you do a cluster analysis, you would likely find groups of members of this population that fit together. What does that mean? That's part of the, whatever the setting is. So what I did was for the performance across all scenarios, did a cluster analysis, found two, a smaller one of 17, a larger one of 63. It was found to be a reasonably good clustering, meaning that they were close together and separate from each other, broadly speaking. And that gives us a very different picture. These green bars are the green that was the smaller group, and then the blue is the larger group. And a number of things become apparent. First, that what we saw when we put them all together was actually hiding a subgroup of students that were consistently doing less well than others. We could almost look at this as being consistent with this data, but then those who are the smaller group that did less well, for a couple of them, they did significantly less well. Significantly in this case mean meaningfully, and also statistically significantly. So then, can we figure out what was different about those cases? What were they missing? So another way to approach this is to, instead of looking at them by patient, to look at them, these findings, it's the same list of findings you saw before, to look at them by type of finding. They're pertinent positives, meaning, yes, he has low blood pressure or high blood pressure, depending on what it is. And then a pertinent negative is something that's conspicuous by its absence. And then pool these, so then we can get analogous measurements as what I showed you before, which is what percent of pertinent positives were they successful recognizing, what percentage of pertinent negatives. And when we look at them all together without a cluster analysis, this is what we get. A similar story, fairly good results across all students, but with a little bit less well on pertinent negatives. We did a cluster analysis, similar breakdown, and here again, we very clearly see this smaller group where they did quite a bit less well than the others who did consistently well on these. And they were especially missing pertinent negatives more than others, which makes sense because you have to recognize that something is significant by its absence. And this is just to look at these two together so you can see the comparison when they're pulled everything together and when we break out the clusters. And since we have two variables that we're looking at, we're actually able to visualize those clusters a little bit. And it makes sense. This large, really tightly packed group of the blue students who were tightly packed at the high level. And then, interestingly, a much more diffuse group that I would say some of them did not so well, but I think what's more apparent is they were less consistent in their ability to recognize pertinent findings. So what's the key insights from this? So we did discover a subgroup of students who struggled with pertinent findings. It's a very critical part of the steps in clinical reasoning. And so we can detect specific errors in clinical reasoning by applying learning analytics to virtual patients. And as you guys will know, this general idea can be applied across the board for other domains where you're giving them a complex simulated environment. You're gathering detailed data and you want to see if you can uncover a deeper sense of what their cognitive model is and whether you have moved it. But another thing that was really interesting is that the averages tended to mask consistent detectable difficulties for subsets of students. So it was only through the cluster analysis that we discovered, what was going on behind the scenes. And I think it was particularly powerful to have multiple patient scenarios and pool the data across them, where we did the pooled pertinent positives and pertinent negatives. And that's the quick story. And I'm happy to take any questions whatsoever. Thanks for giving me the chance to share this with you.
No, thank you for sharing that. We have 2 questions in the chat right now. If you have more, there is about 5 minutes for Q&A. The first question is, how often do you complete an analysis and do you monitor on an ongoing basis?
Well, the sad thing is that this isn't still being used. And I would love to do that. There's a number of things that I would love to do. Monitor on an ongoing basis, and also do something where you tie these kinds of results to their success, like at the beginning of their program versus the end of the program. And also tying it to other measures of clinical reasoning skills. So that's what I would like to do. In this case, that's not happening. There wasn't the funding or to really take this to the next level. So.
And Helen, this is also Helen. After you complete your analysis, do the results go to the leadership team or to the instructional design teams to determine what actions need to be taken?
I have sent them to the instructors and talked with the instructors at the School of Nursing to point out that and to the leadership as well at the School of Nursing, point out this idea that pertinent negatives would be a really fruitful place to spend time and to emphasize during the instruction. So I see this as an exploratory study. I wish I could say this was an ongoing project where we're doing all sorts of stuff and doing everything right. That's not true. But what we do have is an exploratory study showing that this is possible. And I hope it will lead to other funding to do this kind of work that's needed to do it well and do it the way an instructional designer would really want to do it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that, Andrew.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm gonna stop sharing your desktop now.
Great.
And then Brian Duck, if you are ready, we can get you all loaded up and ready to go. Jamie, can you, Erin, can you help us get Brian? Thank you. Awesome. And Brian, you're going to be sharing your screen?
Yes, hopefully.
So if you go up to the top where it says tools and then desktop share.
Trying Chrome. I'm not seeing a menu. Oh, probably the gears. Nope.
Over to the left, there should be a tools option.
I see chat, participants, notes. Unfortunately, I don't see tools. There. Desktop share. Hey, that helps. Thanks, Erin.
right, and Brian's going to be presenting on behalf of Team Makey Makey today. Thank you for being here.
Oh, no. So what I have for us today is a interview that I did with Martin Koob, who's a new cohort member, and I detailed the architecture behind Team Makey Makey's project. And we did about an hour and a half session, so I've edited it down. It might be a little choppy, but this gives us a chance to sort of share it with you and give me some feedback, give us the team some feedback on the Makey Makey project. So I'm going to go ahead and start this, and if the presentation gods are with us today. This was a project in the spring 2020. I'll see if I can bump the volume up. And part of the project was we did ongoing iterations and updates, and some of that video is out there on the GitHub. A lot of it is on YouTube, and I'm linking to my YouTube files as unpublished from the GitHub. So you sort of need to go there to get the links. The palettes here are tools. I'm not going to get into details about too much of that, but the details on the stack information is here. Okay. So the slides that I have up on the screen were initially created for those presentations. And the summary of project activities section, it was sort of a bonus area where we just went through slides really quickly. And this is sort of the detail that I wanted to share with you.
Okay. So you didn't get to go through these parts.
Not into this depth. Okay. We literally went page by page through the slides, but I'm actually going to show you where things are at in terms of what the screens look like. So over here on the right, I'm virtual machined into a MacBook that's downstairs. Okay. This was the MacBook I used for that project. Now I'm on a different machine, so I'm still running that local web server out there. Okay. So part of that architecture, maybe I should start with a faceplate of the app. Yeah. So this is actually the app that we created. Okay. And down at the bottom is a representation of the Makey Makey board. And when the app is running, it'll load the web screen in the widget up at the top. Okay. And I can click on the icons here that I have buttons over the graphic. And then I also have this little extension board that I found that allows you, without getting into wiring on the back of the board, it allows you to just use the alligator clips again for additional letters. So this let us do some extensions of what that board looks like. And then the web page, and you can see I have buttons here for remote and local. So it switches between my remote server, which is duckworks.biz, and I'll share this in the chat so you can actually load the page. And then the local URL is literally pointing at this. So the other machine is running this server. And if I come over here to my active tab, this is the actual page that's running. So if I do a reload, we should see some data scrolling back in the background that it's actually loading the pages. Okay. And there's a couple errors. There's no favorite icon and a few things like that, but it's showing you it's loading this index, CSS, JavaScript. So this is a JavaScript library called Crypto.js, a JavaScript library called xAPI wrapper.js. Part of that xAPI wrapper is this project JavaScript, the CSS, and the Java. Just so yeah, right now it's yeah, and the way this is working, it should cycle through. If I go back to the remote server, let me just make sure we're on the same URL. Visual index, I think I do have it loaded. Yeah. So if I hit the up arrow or the right arrow, Let me click in the browser and see if I'm going to get a response. I'm not getting a response, unfortunately.
That's not the local one, though. That's the
remote one, but
yeah.
What it should do is tell me that it's received a response. So let me try my keyboard rather than clicking. If I use the keyboard or the Makey board, I can then get the feedback that I've selected the W key by clicking the blue button.
Yeah. And
what that's referring to is I have a box that we built. Let me go off screen for a moment and grab it. So we have this joystick box that we built.
Okay, yeah.
And this is the commercial version. We also had, because the Makey is sort of a homemaker thing, we started off with this board. This allowed you to look at the question listed here and touch a response by touching one of these.
Okay.
The buttons are literally made of, they're falling away now, but the buttons are literally made of ping pong balls that are cut in half.
Oh.
So that is not holding up very well, you can see, which led us to look at, okay, how do we find something that's a little less homebrewed and a little more commercial? And so on Amazon and eBay, they have these kits that allow you to put together a joystick, and you can see there's some wires underneath in the Makey board. So if I plug this in and click one of the letters, I'm literally sending a response to the Makey board, and it will send this response out to the server through the live code. And you can see now we have an ID. So that tells us that we have actually sent a statement, an xAPI statement that indicates that something was selected.
Yeah.
So part of this is, you can see the Makey board is lit, is on, and unfortunately I have a few cables hanging, so there's likely to be some incomplete circuits.
Yeah.
But let's see what happens. So there I hit the red button. I'm seeing that I've selected the A key by clicking the red button. And once I click OK, it actually will revise what we're seeing on the screen.
Okay.
And that shows me that that has been sent. So I'm using a visualizer JavaScript library that I mentioned here, the visualizer and the CSS for that.
Okay.
And that reformats that JSON that has been sent and received back from the server, or the LRS, and allows me to sort of drill down and to see what the statement looks like. So here's the agent, the actor that we sent in. Here's the verb that we sent in with an ID for the verb selected. If I hit display, it tells me that that is selected. And because of the structure of the JSON, you're driving down into these items. But you can see that I answered that, I should say, our actor, Anna Johnson, has selected red for question 27 in response to this question.
Yeah.
And if I scroll down further, the correct responses pattern tells me that it should have been yellow.
Okay.
And the choices included 0 through 3, so 4 choices. And these show me what are active within the statement that we're sending. And then the activity detail allows me to see that they completed the activity. The success level was set to false because they didn't match the answer and the correct answer. And then the context here adds us some additional details. So we added in a category, a parent. So the category includes the object type of activity. Excuse me. Both the category and the parent. And then the definition has these additional attributes, an assessment, and our formative assessment. We identify the instructor. So we're adding quite a bit of context to the JSON that's being sent back to the LRS. So part of that is saying our team is Team Makey, and we're identifying the platform as the question response app. And this overall ID is the statement ID that the LRS has sent back. So when we send a statement, the LRS answers back by adding that ID, and that can be used for the query. And in the sense, we're sort of set up to do those queries now within our HTML. We've pulled that data back in and are displaying it. But we didn't really enable that within the time frame of the team. And so the architecture is, we're either going to this local web server or we're going out to the remote web server that I've been showing you. Yeah. And on the local one, the advantage to having this visible is I can go into Mission Control, switch desktops, and see the structure that we're looking at. So the web folder on this other laptop is showing that within Makey, we are looking at the path of, so within the local URL, we're looking at just Makey/visual and the index file. So this is the folder we're using, is visual. We right-click on that and open a new tab. We're using the index file, which then pulls in the JavaScript and CSS. We did a number of iterations, so we literally started off with our minimum viable product and said, what do we need to do to get the Makey board working? Okay, now let's add in a web URL browser widget, and each step sort of progressed a little further. So the earliest version, like I said, is only the Makey board. And then we had another version where I did separately the URL browser and talked to the files on the servers, and was able to take data from the Makey or the keyboard without showing them the feedback that we have on the bottom of this version. And what that let us do was say, okay, you now have the ability within a live code project talking to a web server to send a statement without even it being a Makey specific project. So the idea was we built these iterations, and each one of them can now sort of be brought forward. So what we've done is I've gone back to my local server. You can see in the background I have that structure we were talking about. The visual folder has the index file, has a JavaScript folder underneath it. The crypto JavaScript library is there. The project JavaScript is there, and the xAPI wrapper JavaScript library is there. So the xAPI wrapper comes as this project file, and you can see I've made a few copies and made some changes. But what I've added to it is the visualizer piece. And that gives us the ability to walk through that JSON structure, but it's not required. It's not part of the xAPI wrapper. So I want to focus in on what does it take to send a statement. Within the xAPI wrapper, we are using the project file and the CSS files that are up here, project CSS. And again, the visualizer sort of touches back to that piece we don't want to look at right now. So if I switch over and view the index.html file, this header structure is where we pull in all our scripting. So we have a reference to, I want to just see if I'm missing anything. So here's the first reference to our CSS. So we're pulling in project CSS, which is what formats it on the screen. And excuse me while I clean up a little bit here. Okay. So I want to close up some of the live code screens, and this will give us the ability to view the page at the same time. So again, we're viewing this index.html file, which is the file we're seeing down here. And the libraries are called at this point just to include them. So the code that we see further down will be able to execute that. And then our script further down here, we're talking to Cloudflare, which has some AJAX libraries that are being used. So jQuery, JSON to HTML, and a jQuery again. And then the visualizer script. So if I scroll down a little bit here, we'll go into the body, which shows us what is published as text on the page that we're viewing on the server. And you can see this section here. I'm in a different folder. I apologize. So I'm in this challenge folder, and I'm seeing different code. I apologize for that. So I realized partway through the setup that I needed to be looking at visual, and I had opened other things. Okay. So let me see if I can jump to that quickly here. I don't want visualizer, I want project. We don't know that we need to go in the CSS, but if we do, we can do that. I'm going to open with BB Edit. And there we see our structure again. So back to the HTML file, we should see similar headers than what we saw before. So I'm down here to this body section, and now we should see the correlation with what you're seeing here. Okay, these progress reports and the header text. So all of that is static text. I've got some links in there to allow people, once they get access to one of these pages or the app, when they're running the app, you can actually scroll back up in here and use the links. So if I clicked on the cohort, you can click on the GitHub. It's going to take a moment to load, so I'm going to continue on while it does that. But that's part of why I have these remote and local buttons, is as that loads and shows you the other pages, you can use the remote and local button to return back to the server side. Yeah, you can see it's loading rather slowly. My internet connection is challenged. The other key pieces you see here is ready is what is shown as output within this page when it initially loads. So let me do a reload. You can see our ID is no longer available. So down here we have ready as status within the actor. So I'm literally sending that manually to let the JSON structure be built, but it's just to show that the page is ready and you can send the statement. Okay. And let me bounce back over. So I clicked that link. This took us to the Makey Wiki. Yeah. So the idea is someone who has access to the app can then see where the source files are. So there's quite a bit of detail that I've added out there. I'm going to click remote to get that back off the screen to catch us up with where we're at here. Yeah.
So we're back live. That should give us an understanding of where we're at. And I believe Jessica said she shared this URL with everybody. So the idea is within the Makey application, we're pointing to this page. This page operates independently. You can use, like I mentioned here, WASDIFIG. Any of those letters will send a statement. And once the statement's sent, you get a JavaScript confirmation, and your visualizer then loads with the ID, and you can see it expands. Some of the context is added in, and results are added in as a node. So I want to try and open that and go through it. I understand from Jennifer we have some questions.
Yep, one from Andy. Are the credentials in your xAPI wrapper file not the actual credentials to access your LRS? If not, how do you occlude that information?
Jen, I'm not hearing you. Are you muted?
Oh, can you not hear me? Still can't hear me? Oh, for
Sorry,
some reason.
Jessica, I'm not hearing you. Oh, they can.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
So let's go back to the.
Let me. How about now?
Can you hear me okay, Brian? I sent you the question in Slack. So you can go ahead and.
Thought I heard something that switched.
And while our next presenter.
Yeah, I see the Apologies for this. I don't know why I went mute. Scroll to Andy's question above. Are the credentials in your xAPI wrapper file not the actual credentials to access your LRS? How did you include that information? My understanding is they are the credentials to publish to the LRS, but they're not my login credentials for me to edit my account nor access the results. So I've presented this as a separate set of credentials that are allowed to submit the statements without necessarily being able to go in on the account and make changes to the LRS settings.
So can you hear me okay, Brian? No? All right. Aaron, can we get Judy teed up as a moderator? I'll send. Perfect.
I'm going to type in Slack. Is there any other questions?
All right. Welcome, Judy. So we'll get you should be able to do a screen share as well. So above you'll see the tools and the screen share whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
I'm in a little bit of a rural area, so I'm a little bit hesitant here, but hopefully this works okay. So we were warning to share work that is in progress. We're happy to do, but I do want to add that caveat in progress right now. Pebble is doing the main purpose of our project is to create something in this semester that we can springboard for discussion toward what people would want to get in a certain kind of given a certain and because of content morphing and because of the recent development of global content morphing features, which allow for the personalization of the entire once, our idea was basically to create a Pebble book that is that has two different versions, one that can be used as self-study and one that can be used with a facilitator in a kind of facilitated. So that is the end goal, and I'm going to take you through some we've used to get there and sort of show where we are right now. First, honestly, come up with a different way of storyboarding to take this approach, because storyboards of your thinking and assist your thinking at the same time, and essentially storyboarding these at the same time let us up with something different. So basically to create something that allowed us to always think at the same time what was happening, what was different in the two different experiences, and then at the same time also what is the so essentially it's a table, a screen. Sometimes the table is sort of split between the facilitated study experience. You can see we're planning some video with just or with someone else, and sometimes the experiences are the same, and these are the book that will be the same and will not be content morphed, and there's back and forth, and we're almost done with the sitting for the entire experience. So this then is also, of course, what we meant. And currently this is in development using the Pebble InDesign plugin are a little bit wonky right now. We're at a little bit of an awkward phase to use the plugin, just a new version of InDesign. And, you know, this really highlights for us why we are using a separate authoring tool, because dependent form off to things like this. So in the book, we actually discovered some things that need to be updated in the plugin. So things are rough. I'm going to go over to a Pebble reader that is already stood up. There is in this process. I'm just going to use
Hey, Judy,
it
sounds like you.
Yes.
Sorry, it just sounded like you stepped further away from the mic. You sound okay now.
Oh, okay. I am in the same place, but probably an internet issue thing. So basically what I just did is dragged the EPUB export that we created over to the Pebble bookshelf. So what we're seeing right now is that issue, normally there would be a toolbox that would allow us, would have a button allow us to do what we call global content morphing. With the switch of that button, it would morph or change things throughout the book that you can see in the story. For example, this first bit, we have a chapter title, Introduction to the xAPI Cohort, and then the first thing is going to be different. You have the facilitated experience turned on or the self-study experience turned on. I'm not able to do that on a global level, so I left the little dials in here so that we could just do that on an individual level. And so right now we just have a placeholder for a video. There would be a and then as we do the other chapters, looks like it's going to be a little bit slow to load. Okay, so super rough right now. Almost no formatting has been done, and this is just literally copying and pasting to InDesign, and then extensions or the and then exporting, formatting still needs to be done. So this is not content more. This section would be the same regardless of whether you're doing the facilitated or a self-study experience. See in the storyboard. So this is the new chapter, show highlights. I'm just getting started. I'm ride or die for xAPI from you. And again, a content morph here, which right now we just are controlling on an individual basis, but the global morph were active, then that would be this little block would be controlled by the global morph, and then we just have the polls that were so somebody can go through and sort of what are they bringing to the xAPI cohort. In this case, they should be able to do, there we go, full responses. So what skills are you bringing to the cohort? And then there, what else can you, what else contribute? And then, you know, it leads people through more of, more thought about, okay, now how much time can you contribute, and things like that. So, but this is all that is built at this point. And we would really love the final, at the xAPI party, there is to also have some discussion about this material as the foundation for these two different kinds of experiences. What kinds of analytics would you want to see? You know, what kind of do you want to see? And put some thought around doing something with that is experiences. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Judy. I really love to see a work in progress, and I appreciate how you tie it in that this is an opportunity to come back in the party. That's what these demos are designed for, and to get some good feedback. So if anybody has any questions for Judy about the Pebble book, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. I'm going to pull over my presentation. Yeah, so it was really great to see development from the storyboard to prototype. That was great, Helen. I agree. Next week, we have quite a few teams signed up to do their demos. So we have adaptive learning, Zoom, early childhood education, storyline engagement. So next week we might go over a little bit, but that's okay. If you have to hop, you can always check in on the recording. And if anybody else is not on this list and does want to present, just let me know in Slack, and I'll get you added up. We might flex on the time a little bit for these demos. Again, next week we'll be here at 2:00 p.m. And for anyone who has not had a chance to present on your project team, or on your project and you want to, you can always register and submit a proposal for the xAPI party. The link is there. It also goes out every week in your weekly update. And we can also put it in Slack for you. I believe Megan put it in Slack, but we'll remind you. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email our help desk, or you can always message me in Slack. As always, thanks for being here, and have a great rest of your Thursday.